And we saw, I think, one in context, so Ken publish how Aakash is at the verge of now spinning the boat and trying to lever out to online edtech, right? I think Byju's is holding on to it. There were talks, rumored talks of an academy and an academy and Aakash coming together. Maybe rumored, right? But there were talks about.
All right. Let's go. All right, we got the Ari Gold of the Indian startup ecosystem, Jitesh Luthra, who literally knows everyone in can kind of slide in anyone in anyone's inbox. Also, aka Wingman, Iceman, whatever you want to call it, because he was today in some random airport again, tagged for some reason. We've got the artist slash weightlifter slash cricketer doppelganger or whatever you want to say, Aakash Bhatt, and the community man himself, Suhas Motwani, and then obviously me, your BFF, Manav. Let's get this started, guys. Thank you for joining again.
Thanks, Manav.
Yeah, guys. Good to see you
Loves his
guys.
introduction. I didn't actually roast him this time, but I was about to but I was like, maybe I'll control my words. Guys, I think a regular week in the ecosystem, well, I think it's not that regular as regular it is, but I want to talk about two key things today. One of them was basically around how the edtech ecosystem in India is faring, what's actually happening. Was the market large enough, or was it just a bubble? Was there value created, XYZ? And then after that, later discuss a few other things around the Indian early stage tech ecosystem. But to just start things off, I heard there was not well heard. I read there was a pivot with Teachment. I heard that Byju's had this whole thing about valuation getting slashed and then raising valuation same amount of money. I don't want to get into like too much on the big dogs here because I think they have their own struggles. But I just wanted to get a little bit of sense first from Suhas around you guys do a lot of these product led courses and there's a lot of educational content that you guys do through product folks, right? And we've been seeing there's a huge, at least in the investor community, when I'm talking to other investors, they're all kind of shying away from looking at tech companies right now. A lot of companies are struggling to raise follow-on rounds, and fortunately or unfortunately, I would say some have pivoted to a more profitable model, which is kind of not how you would imagine a venture scale company to do something like that at so early stages in its company. So what's happening is that the future outlook of spending money to get market share and then eventually become really large is pivoting to become like, oh, save money, conserve cash, become profitable, and run the business and show like that. But just generally, Sauce, what's your sense on what's happening in the ecosystem with that tech, particularly a few startups where you might have probably invested in because you're a super investor as well. But how are you seeing things? And then I want to get to we'll probably have Akash if you could plug in if there's something which you had seen in the valley across the years, and you think there's something getting replicated.
No, absolutely. I think I'll let you and Akash chime in from the investor point of view. I'll just chime in from where we see this going forward, right? I think what we saw in the pandemic was definitely, and even a little before pandemic, I think with the entire geo-led era, there's a lot of sales-heavy edtech that we saw, right? Which is now unraveling. People are understanding, okay, hey, is there outcomes in this, right? What is really picked up, or where that edtech 2.0 shift that you're seeing is the Physics Wallah model.
Hmm.
Low ticket sizes, very high distribution, and convert a part of that funnel, which is what, if you see, an academy also started with, right? Byju also started with tons of great content. An academy did it via, I think, YouTube. That was their strategy, and Byju's did it with a lot of cat material, right? It was an offline coaching center. What is Byju's in 2000, I think 11, 12, right? This is where I think one thing maybe what we're realizing is, okay, it's great at scale, but sales-led edtech models are coming to stop, maybe because of where the market is going towards, especially if it's completely online. Where we are seeing resurgence is offline again, with Byju's taking Aakash, an academy setting up offline centers. Scalar announced one today. I think they are launching their undergrad course, and I think that I'm pretty bullish about. I think I'm not sure again from the investor point of view on scalability, but I know there is a definite cash flow business that is going to come back in all the offline models, right? And we saw, I think, one in context, so Ken publish how Aakash is at the verge of now spinning the boat and trying to lever out to online edtech, right? I think Byju is holding on to it. There were talks, rumored talks of an academy an academy and Aakash coming together. Maybe rumored, right? But there were talks about this. So I think offline edtech is somewhere back, um, and money making. Um, there is a definite move towards low cost, low ticket size, high distribution edtech model. I think these are two models that we're going to see in 23, 24 for sure.
Nice. It took me 30 seconds to understand which Akash you're talking about, and I thought Akash is pivoted from. But man, Akash, we haven't seen that happen essentially with US edtechs, right? Like there was the Coursera, there was the Udemy. They continued to get built out as online presence. I'm not sure if they had any offline presence. Do you guys know about any?
No, I don't think they had any offline presence as such. The only thing that I can remotely even think of was Khan Academy back in the day when he used to teach his cousins. That was the probably the only nephew and niece, sorry, and that was probably the only offline beginnings that Khan Academy had. But everything has since then been online. The challenges quite here have been quite different. Yes, there's been Khan Academy. I think Suhas was probably mentioning this in the chat, non-profit, but still the origins kind of like allude to the fact that everybody had been online first from almost beginning because of the reach, because of the
Yeah.
opportunity and what it kind of like offers you, right? Like India is a
Yeah.
different experience altogether because you also need to take a look at how the education system in the US was the education system in India. In India, it's not K-12 that is given a lot of importance. It's K all the way up until engineering, or sometimes even beyond. It's postgraduate as well. That's your entire life cycle of education when you take a look at it. But here, a lot of people drop out of a high schools. A lot of people just finish high schools, and it is considered to be enough for you to go out and get a decent enough job for you to just make a living. In India, you good luck, getting out of 12th standard and saying that you're going to go and have a pretty decent living. So the way that the economy is structured is very different in India versus here as well, because the opportunities for people are very different. So education as such had been looked at very differently from different points of view. Even for Coursera, Udemy, any of the other big education startups that you see here in the US, the market started in the US, but it's always been global. And that's kind of where they really struck a chord, is trying to go after a global market that looked at the American quality of education and almost revered it to an extent, saying that this is what we want and this is the accessibility that we've been waiting for. And that is very different in India. When you take a look at it in comparison, yes, the global numbers might almost match Indian numbers, but the competition within India also is like so high right now. It's very difficult to like enter a crowded space. You have Unacademy, you have Vedantu, you have Byju. Yeah, of course, the offerings might be slightly different, test prep, K-12, everything else, but the competition for any edtech player to right now go into the market, competing with also free resources and tools that's available, plus offline coaching, it's very, very hard for somebody to win that market just out and out by saying that I'm going to come out with a superior course offering. It's not going to be pure course that you're going to win on. It's going to be price that you win on. It's going to be offline models that you win on. It's that in-person experience. It's a lot of things that you're used to, or what parents are used to or have been used to. With our generation, I think it's a little changing. People our generations are getting married, they'll have kids. The way that we start looking at education is going to be online first, but our parents never looked at online education and actually felt that it was validated enough for us to continue pursuing it. What we were encouraged to do is still go to an offline tuition class, because that did seem like the traditional way of actually learning. So that shift is still coming about, with a lot of parents now probably pushing their kids into that online sort of like mode of education, and we'll see that happen. But what we saw in the last decade was just fight for attention and fight for customers. Maybe the next decade is going to be fight on quality of education, and that's where we'll see a lot of these tech companies or ed tech companies battling it out. But right now it's all about just acquire users at whatever cost, and then we'll see, we'll make money in the next 10 years. That's how I view it, and that's why comparison to maybe a US market is, unfortunately not fair as well.
That
I have a
that's hmm.
I have a slightly differing view where I actually feel that the digital reminiscence that COVID left or accelerated will somewhere remain. So while there is an offline shift, I think just like with workspaces, I think the true edtech will probably become a hybrid somewhere, because you cannot eliminate the digital first habits that people created, right? So I think the truth lies somewhere in between. And I think Akash, when you were saying, both of you also mentioned about like the larger companies, right? I want to rephrase that, but actually say that I think these new companies will sort of live in the shadow of the giants. And and if you look at it from an investor perspective, pretty much every possible investor is locked in to one or more of these players, right? Which sort of means that you pretty much can't do anything new without having some sort of a blessing, I feel. India's not a large enough venture market that when you want to scale something big, you cannot not have an approach from Byju's or an academy, maybe even Vedantu, I don't know, but at least these two, right? And the that to me is interesting. The other slight difference I have in terms of like just how I look at, and I'm not a consumer person, like I don't dig at this deeper. To Akash's point, actually I feel like this extends much beyond obviously just K-12, right? I think K-12 is actually split. If you look at it in terms of who you sell to, even that evolves within your school period, because you have an initial period where you only sell to the parent, then you sell to both the parent and the child. There are times you also sell to the teacher, um, and that moves when you know get to college where you're upselling to just you as a student. Then your employer also comes in actually, at some point, right? So I think like it's anybody who's able to map it well, I think that's how I look at it. And ultimately, quality, yes, will matter, but I think at the same time there's so much money already that I fear. I'll take an analogy. Actually, I feel that there may not be much innovation happening over the next decade, just because it's not in favor of the large giants. Like large giants
Yeah.
is
So
not the
I
right
think
word, just the giants.
we had we made a couple of investments across EdTech, which have been a mix of enabling schools as lead school, which became a unicorn quite lately. And then there are a few others which have been outcome based and getting jobs and hiring, and they've been growing pretty well as well. But I think one thing which I am feeling a little like today, one is the question of can is there room for innovation? And to what Jitesh is saying, because there is no capital left to deploy across the ecosystem, because you're always thinking in some overarching sense you're going to be competing with your own portfolio. So would you be deploying capital into that innovation space or not? And that's automatically going to restrict the backers and believers who are going to come into this space. So one, I don't, Jitesh, just a little contrary to what you're saying, I don't think capital can uh, I see where you're coming from, and that's a very straightforward investor lens that even I would take at looking at any opportunity. But I feel there's a lot of, if you have to draw down innovation today in educational and technology, how education can leverage that. If SOAS, you had to start something, what would you think if you're talking to an early stage founder who's going after the broad range that Akash mentioned? That means not even 12. And I think right now there's MBA happening online as well, right? So we've gone past post grad as well in taking out edtechs and going beyond that. I'm pretty sure kal ek aur cheez aa jayegi. But if you had to think about a bottom up way of building a large scale venture, uh, what would be the two or three things that you would want to keep in mind?
I put it on the chat as well. I think largely what we're looking at edtech in India is test prep. That's where I think we've at least validated the market. Second, think about it, right? K-12, a lot of K3, K5, K6. We're seeing all these young startups come in which are targeting even younger students. Think about it. Yes, okay, there are kids 2 years old, 3 years old. They are picking up tabs and your phones and going on YouTube, and they're picking it much faster. That I agree, right? But also, I'm seeing my younger cousins, they aren't as hooked on to online education as you think. Yes, they are hooked on to YouTube because it's entertainment, right? And yes, you can probably give them some rhymes to learn numbers, and if they get a natural interest, maybe they go down that rabbit hole. It is possible. But I think what they're hooked on to is the entertainment, and digital devices are addictive, right? All these apps were built for that. So yes, they do get hooked on to digital devices, and that could be one of the hypotheses why saying that okay, maybe the future of education is online, and a lot of people started that. But traditional classrooms moving to online, which happened in pandemic, I think that we are seeing a slight reversal. I think a lot of young students going back into classroom because attention spans are not there, right? I think to a certain extent maybe some form of online education will continue, but I think for really early stage I'm going to see you're going to see a lot of this reversal, and that is coming back to the offline education point. Even as we grow up, right? You're seeing masters union, you're seeing
Mm.
scalar come out with offline universities. They're targeting UG there. We spoke about an academy, we spoke about Byju's again doubling down on offline, and these are rich cash flow businesses. They're not going anywhere. Your schools, colleges are here to stay. Can you modernize this? Can you come up with a really interesting way to set up offline plus online hybrid education? I think maybe that is where the future is. But I think the entire transition to completely online hasn't played out as well, at least when we're seeing scale. As lifestyle businesses, they're great, right? You spoke about we're seeing MBA done online. I think, yes, there is a certain TG who would love to learn. Learning is not going anywhere. I think all
Yeah.
four of us love to learn about new topics, and we are largely learning from online resources, right? Whether it's blogs, courses, mm, anything, right? It could be CVCs. But are these scalable? Is still the question mark here.
Oh, fair, fair. Awesome, man. I mean, I don't know. My general gut on EdTech is that it's definitely there to stay. But if anyone's building out, they should try and understand how customer acquisition costs can play inversely down the line. That means after a point, you start losing on out on the market who you've reached everyone in the first go or the second go or the third go, and after that you just keep spending more and more money. And if you don't, I think the biggest killer in edtech has been CAC, be it through a sales led model or building a huge sales conversion model. But I think that's where we have seen a lot of contribution margins go crazy. So your cost to actually acquire a customer suddenly starts spiking like crazy when you start raising more money because people give you capital to say. And what I think what happened in 2021 or 2020 for that matter was when there was this huge boom, especially with edtech and class shifting online, when people received that funding, this the idea of when you get money is not only that you have capital to deploy, but it's also a vote of confidence in someone telling you what you're doing is you're doing it right. Take this money and do it better. Like that's exactly what's happening. And then because of that, a lot of them did not actually achieve product market fit, spent a lot of money in customer acquisition, did not have long term retention. If I have to talk about edtech, if I have education, if I've learned really well, and Akash, I think you can vouch for it because it happens in America a lot, is you have a huge alumni network from your college. Jitesh, you know it from Manipal as well. It sticks, man. Education where you learn in peer-to-peer learning, it has a long-term impact on it. You become advocates for it down the line. Which edtech do you become an advocate for today? I am an advocate for my school, but you know what I'm talking about. That long-term evangelist that gets built out, I think that's still missing. If somebody is able to crack that, I think there's a huge opportunity at play. I mean that's what I would say, would be my 2 cents.
So that's a great point that you bring up there because you have seen traditional like SaaS companies use PLG, right? But the only thing that's kind of like come from PLG onto like EdTech has only been on the pricing strategy where you're offering freemium models and then trying to like push people up the pricing curve. But what a lot of EdTech companies have not done a great job is using community-led growth, and that actually that's a point that you were trying to make. It's saying why would people want to like come and say that hey, this is my herd, this is my crew, this is where I belong. Where I saw one company do a fairly okay job at the beginning was Stoa School, because they were focusing a lot more on that community angle and making it feel like an exclusive sort of an MBA course where people felt, hey, I've done this. It was very similar to maybe a Reforge in the US, where you felt like, okay, I'm actually getting into a very exclusive club. But both Reforge as well as Stoa since have gone down in terms of quality of people that they've tried to retain, because that's your classic constraints when it comes to scaling. When you've got that growth capital coming in, now you're going to compromise on quality and you're going to start accepting a lot more people, which is also one of the things that people complained about on deck, and on deck had to then scale back massively. And now when you go to the on deck website, they only have ODF. They got rid of everything else. They got rid of on deck climate, on deck chief of staff, on deck 100 other shit, because they felt that it was saturating the power of the community. So that's the other problem. Either you throw money, you try and grow quickly, you dilute the community, and then you feel that shit, my community was the most important, and my secret sauce, that was what was attracting people to it. And then when you start realizing that, you then have to like reverse engineer some of these things, which is what Reforge is doing, which is what On Deck is doing. I'm not sure if Stoa is doing it and people like Stoa are going to be doing it, but that probably will have to be done, which means you don't need the same kind of VC money to actually scale. You probably will have to keep it small. Education's hard, man. Education's not easy,
Yeah.
which is why the offline ones have actually done a better job than the online ones.
Actually, Akash, just your last line is what I'd love to double down on, right? I think what you mentioned, you started with the community first approach. I think they will become great businesses. It's just that how do you look at this from a VC angle is something I'd love to look at. One difference that I see between India and US is US has much higher ticket sizes, right? Reforge on deck charge anywhere closer to your $5,000 ranges. Product schools there as well. Um, India is not there. It is still between your $1,000 to $2,000 range. Will it? Do you think the scale, the volume that we have here will help match up the VC number? Is that something that you think will happen here? Maybe there it will be more value, lesser number of
How much
students.
does per school charge?
Today it's at 2.8 lakhs. That's closer to $3,000. Yeah,
So
little more than three
I
thousand.
actually have another angle given we talked about on deck and stuff. I think it's worth also breaking down what do we really get from these education institutions, right? Like to your point, Manav, right? A lot of this is network. And if you go back to what I think Sam Parr launched, Hampton, right? I feel we're entering an era where exactly people are saying, listen, you know what? We don't have to raise venture money for everything. Slightly closed door paid communities. Basically, if Gymkhana were to be built for the modern generation, what would that look
Yeah.
like? I always go back to that. For all of us coming from whatever background, for me coming from middle class background, like I never had access to something like that, right? And those were OG clubs where you knew that when you walked in, your network, like it just multiplies just because you have access, right? So I actually feel a lot of this will overlap. If it's ultimately about network, um, and you delink it with where you went to school, then the moment someone cracks this different, like Hampton, I'm very bullish on. I would love to build that for India, for example, right?
Yeah.
Um, some of these, if done well, because you ultimately want a professional community, right, where you can learn from someone and get access and things get done. If that gets solved, then why do you want to bring education into the mix? That's my counter
I think
argument.
education here was a wedge, right? Like
Yes,
I
I'm
think
saying that the
on
wedge
deck
will
did.
go away. I'm saying the wedge will go away.
What would that
Because
starting point be for you? Would that be membership,
so I
exclusive
would,
access?
yes, and I think that starts from a different tier. So it'll have to be for like, it'll break down for like early professionals separately, scaled people separately. It could be broken down by like, it'll start with geographies potentially. I think that's where I feel some of
But
this will overlap.
you could look at it the other way as well, right? Because I don't think education can go away, because what you get
It's not
from
going to go
it
away. I'm saying
is
like, it's not going to go away. I think it'll have to be looked at it differently purely because a big part of what people expected out of education, because a lot of people studied not because of what they studied because of who they met there, right? MBAs are known in India as like places where people find their life partners.
there's an
It is, yeah.
IIMIT.com. What the
Like
hell was that?
like go and speak to like seriously, like I've heard this from so many people,
I
right?
didn't qualify for it. I'm married as well.
And not everything is about it, not everything's about you. My point is that um like you get what I'm coming from. Like, so why it was a wedge? So I'm saying like the value of that community may diminish a little bit. So it may not be the moat anymore because people are already getting, or like and I think this applies a little specifically to upskilling and like professional life, and less about, you know, like for example, in fact, I actually have a question for Swaz. Like, if you were to build TPF again, um, what if this became member only, right? And had like 1/10 the number of people.
100%.
It looks very
I
different.
think that is needed,
Exactly.
even as a, yeah, even as an extension to what it is today. I think it is solving a very different problem. But as people graduate, as people grow within the same community, I think the need for a member only community, even for us, is very very strong. So I completely believe in that model as well, right? I know there are tons of other people building in that space, and
And
TPF
it so
started
has
with a
to have
very different.
acceptance rate. It has to have low acceptance rate because
Sorry.
it has to have
Exactly.
low
So
acceptance.
scarcity
Correct,
mindset, right?
exactly.
Like scarcity mindset.
Yeah,
So I think
exactly,
like
exactly.
I don't want to deviate from edtech specifically, but I was just wanting to point out the community angle there, that I think what you get out of it ultimately is key here. And I feel like people will delink that from just like education. So that's like if you're trying to study business and I get you a on deck equivalent community of 100, 500 people who are just learning from each other, would you still pay the 2.8 lakhs versus me asking you for 50,000 rupees, knowing that somebody who has already been there vouches for it? You know, those things. I think like on deck started really
Just
well.
a
Yeah.
yeah. No,
They
just a
start
caveat to
out
what
with
Jagdish is
dinners, right?
actually mentioning here, where he talks about community, right? So just to play devil's advocate as well, and I'll speak from my own personal experience. I went to an educational institution undergrad where I didn't want to study engineering. I went to one of the best schools in Bangalore, but I didn't want to do engineering. So the 4 years of my life spent there was spent trying to study a day or two before the exam, get a decent grade, and just get the fuck out, right? But for somebody like me, when I went to business school, it was the first opportunity for me to fall in love with an education system and courses that I was interested in. So for me at that point, community became an added benefit. I went there for the education. I went there because I was for the first time in my life studying modules, courses, being in class. I was a first bencher, man, in business school. I was a last bencher all throughout. I didn't even attended classes. Forget about being a last bencher. I was outside the classroom. So I
You
barely
look like
attend
a first
classes.
bencher.
Huh?
You look like a first bencher.
No, I don't look like a first bencher. But that's what I did because for the first time I was enjoying what I was studying. And I wanted to answer. I wanted to like go home, read my case studies, come contribute in class. But that was what we'll probably see that happening which is why when I talk about it 10 years down the line, the quality of education will have to improve because you will end up, the education system in general is not going to evolve at the speed at which maybe these online classes may have the flexibility of doing so, because you're taking a look at the larger, you probably are educating 600 million people from a central board or an or a state board point of view, and it's hard for you to change syllabus, curriculum, and all of that at that scale. But if you're an edtech company where you have, let's say, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, couple of lakhs of students, you have that flexibility of experimenting with courses, education modules, styles, and therefore that may become a wedge going forward. It's not right now, but it may happen going forward. And speaking of personal experience, you'll have people who'll come to you because they want to learn and study something different as opposed to what they're being taught, because they may not be interested in it or they were looking for different schools of thought. When I was in algorithms class in engineering, I remember studying that through a professor who was teaching MIT course on YouTube, and he was putting his content out there, and I
I've
was
done that as
studying.
well. MIT open source.
Right, open source, exactly.
I think a lot towards a lot of key takeaways, which was around taking a community led approach or going test prep masses, being phygital, I guess having physical presence as well as digital presence, having an angle of the network that you bring on the table, And I think those are very solid points that people could actually use for like when they're thinking about building an EdTech. I think a lot of people. Did I just coin? Yes, I did. But the side chat's on fire.
Yeah, that is
Uh,
so cool. That is something that we got to be using going forward. Put it out on Twitter and everything. And I think that's a really cool word that you just came up with.
what word did I just come up with?
Physical,
Phygital.
physical and digital. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, phygital. Phygital is common, man.
It's the
I
first that
think.
I'm hearing of it.
Have you guys never heard phygital?
I've heard before.
Yeah.
Fidgetals
It's
is
a
the
very
thing, dude. Is the
consulting type
thing
of
with the
word, so
entire
I've heard it before.
NFT wave.
Yo, sorry. So I think there was another topic which I want to talk about was this whole community and where it sits, which was social media. But I'm going to leave that aside because we're a little short on time. And I want to ask about the whole Web3 of education or EdTech, which was very hot for a very short window. A lot of people spoke crazily about studying in the metaverse. A lot of startups got backed. I can see Suhas's face. A lot of startups got backed with the metaverse of education. Uh, and do you think it was too early for its time? That's the first question. So, do you think what was the timing like? The second is, does it need to exist or will it exist? What do you think? And I think each one of us can come up with answers on it. And the third one is there a need for it, or what how would it look like? So if you have to break that down, who's going to go first?
I'll kick it off.
Yeah.
I think it's the metaverse of anything, right? It's not just education. To be honest, I think like I think Mark Zuckerberg also got this wrong, so I think everyone else is forgiven. Um, and I'll tell you one thing. I think the lens that we are looking at it, all four of us are beyond that phase where if you see a lot of youngsters today live in the digital world first, right? We still crave for an offline meeting. We know how different it is when the four of us, for example, catch up in person, right? It's a lot different, right? But imagine three generations after us, they've grown up in the digital world, right? So today you ask your younger cousins, especially those who are not in India, outside India, what they want as a birthday present, right? And think about the times when you got birthday present. Very, very different, right? For us, it might have been maybe a Hot Wheels car, for example, right? For them, it is 9 out of 10 times going to be something digital. It could just be Roblox credits, for example, right? For us, maybe collectibles back in the day, we would have asked for some money to collect those Pokemon cards, right? Or WWE card, cricket cards, for example, Tazos, Beyblades, right? But in today's world, you don't see any of that. Like those have become like very exclusive collectibles. Like it might sell for like $100 a card, but people are still collecting digital. Why did NFTs become a thing last year? Because digital collectibles are becoming a thing, right? Why it lost steam was, hey, where is the application at? What do I do once I collect? It became the cred coins of the Web3 world, right? So it's not only a Web3. Today, people are complaining on Twitter on, okay, hey, what do I do? I have a lakh, I have 10 lakh of these coins. What do I do with that? Right? So Web3 or Web2, end of the day, it boils down to utility. If you talk about education, hey, are you and me going to sit? We're tired of Zoom, dude. Like, we've come to a phase where even this 2D version is tiring. But um, if there is a space and time where younger kids are already on their phones from day 60, right, when they're like a couple of months old itself, then they're going to grow up in that environment where that becomes very natural to them, right? So maybe I'd say we're a little too early into it, but there is a space and time where this is going to be a lot more existent.
So I'll say is too early. This will exist in the future, and this is a problem to solve. Jitesh.
I don't have a strong enough take. I'm not completely convinced. Um, I think it'll have some relevance, but to me, it comes down to one fact that you know a lot of people thought that they could build relationships on Zoom and do business, but you got to get on that damn plane to do this. The world runs on
And tag Jitesh, and I
the
also
world
have to
runs
tag.
on 3D.
Yeah.
So unless you can replicate the everything is about both art and science. So I think if art can be replicated, the art of people can be replicated on the metaverse, then yes. But I think like until that doesn't happen, you still need to be in 3D, as I put it. And like I've had this conversation with a bunch of people in their early 20s who come from a writing first world. So I think it's a similar example to me. Who come from a writing first world for whom building distribution is easy. It doesn't come easy to, well, not to this room except me, but like we've learned it the hard way, right? But they don't know the value of real relationships, which have been built over shared interests, which have been built over sharing memories, which compound only over time, right? I think the same example applies here. So the metaverse will have some role, probably more in gaming than anything else. It's already there, but whether it can really replace some use cases which require you to be in person, I don't think so.
Okay, so Jitesh is saying he doesn't know about the timing or not, but definitely not right now, I guess. Maybe it will be there in the future, and it is a good to have and not a must have. Is that right, Jitesh?
Yeah, it's not a painkiller. It's I think it's a solution looking for a problem.
Yeah, fair. Akash, what's your take?
I come from a very similar school of thought as Suhas did, where I do feel this is going to be something that is going to be ubiquitous in the future. And we're already living in a digital world. We use, like today, if I were to compare metaverse from the future, it's going to be everything that we do online. Like we escape from reality and go to Instagram. We escape from reality and go to YouTube.
So we're
We escape
discussing
from
education,
reality.
like quite literally just education.
No, I'm just saying we
Huh.
escape, right? But
Yeah.
whatever we do, we are moving towards like something that is not real. What is metaverse? Metaverse is just a creation of this pseudo world that we all have personas that we live in. Instagram is the perfect analogy for metaverse because we are trying to be people on Instagram. We are not ourselves. 99% of of us are some version of who we want to be, or we're trying to portray a kind of personality that we wish we actually had. But that's a teeny tiny sliver of who you are, but not completely who you are. Like if you give me time, I would just become a fitness influencer. That would be all I want to do all my life.
You
But
are
that's a
already
part of my
good.
life, right? So it's not really something that most people will end up doing for good parts of their careers or professional life. So I do see the future being metaverse focused. Maybe not right now because there are a lot of naysayers. People did not want this to like just kick off for a number of reasons. And you talk about education, you talk about any other part as well. There will be adoption going forward, we like it or not, because what to Jitesh's point, what we need to look at is look at metaverse and say it's not going to replace our real life experiences and interactions. It's always going to be an extension of it. It's the way we continue to build on things and not continue to just use that as the sole focus of building relationship. It's going to be an added benefit. I'll give you examples of me gaming on Call of Duty almost every other day and playing with two people who I've never met in my life, but we're on an Instagram together and we call each other and say, hey, we want to play Call of Duty, can you come on to it? That's how I met a couple of my first friends when I was playing FIFA, while just playing people with things online with them. So there are going to be relationships you'll end up having in this world where you don't have to meet somebody in person. It's going to be very specific to that particular task. And I honestly, I mean, if they hear this at some point, they'll probably, somebody might take offense to it. But I really don't care if I don't meet that person. That person is not going to change my life. But what that person brings to my life, that 1 hour of Call of Duty that we play, and that's all I need them for. And vice versa. That's all probably they need me for, to be that third person on their team. That's it, period. So there'll be use cases that we'll use metaverse for going forward, or the concept of metaverse will be very prevalent in our lives in some context, but it's not going to be the only way that we continue to build a relationship. It's going to be one version that is going to be a very dominant in terms of its existence, and we'll see what those use cases are. But I see it playing out in the next 4 or 5 years. We're already in it in some sense, but it'll come out in the form of 3D very soon.
Right. So I'm gonna articulate yours to say that not the right time. The right time's probably in 4 or 5 years for it to become a little more mainstream. Is this something that will happen? Yes. Is this a need to have? You're saying can be case by case, but become huge channels or catalysts to promote certain things.
Yeah,
Uh,
we're almost there, but we don't want to call it metaverse right now. That's it. But we are escaping from our real lives and heading into this one place where, unfortunately, where we spend hours and hours
yeah, the four
together.
of us are
This,
never in the same city.
sorry,
I'm saying the four of us are never in the same city as well.
exactly.